Welcome to Secrets for an Inspirational Life with Mimi Novic, the place where every heart tells its story. Whether it's inspiration, courage or hope you need, you've come to the right place. Sit back and enjoy the journey with us. Subscribe below to be sure you don't miss future episodes.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Secrets for an Inspirational Life. How are you all today? I hope that there is a little bit of joy and a lot of beauty in your life right now. And if there isn't in these moments, because I know it is a very difficult time on earth, but we must never forget that fear is something that is just an illusion. And we must ask ourselves, like I ask myself every day, is what is our purpose in this life? Is what we are doing every day bringing us closer to fulfilling our soul mission? Or is it actually taking us further away? I think that is one of the most important questions that we can, as human beings, ask ourselves. And also, in the pursuit of peace and this sort of momentary happiness that comes in this world, we must follow the dictates of our heart, because we all know somewhere deep inside of us, what is our reason for being. And if we try to run away, we will suffer. When we align ourselves with that particular mission, we find this eternal peace within our hearts and our soul. Now, I am so excited, and you all know out there how excited I get about my guests, but I'm actually super excited today because I have a fantastic guest who is all the way from New York. And he is the extremely talented, and I have to say a little bit enigmatic, Vincent Lyn. Vincent is a composer, author, actor, filmmaker, humanitarian, and world martial arts expert. He has appeared in many well-known films, amongst them Tiger Cage and Operation Condor. It must be mentioned also that Jackie Chan has said that Vincent was one of the best fighters he has ever worked with. As well as being an actor, Vincent is an acclaimed musician who has performed in prestigious establishments with Grammy award-winning artists, and his most recent concert was in Carnegie Hall. In 2019, his humanitarian work led him to be voted in the top 100 human rights defenders by the International Human Rights Commission. He has completed many dangerous missions, and one of them while he was a bodyguard for a VIP in Ghana, where Vincent visited a shelter where there were 20 children which had just been rescued from slavery. This and many other events in his life inspired him to promote awareness and to raise money for rescue and recovery projects of trafficked children. He knew that helping would alleviate the suffering of these poor children, and this was to become his life mission. In turn, this has led Vincent to start a non-profit organization called We Can Save Children, whose mission is to rescue and recover children in Africa and the Middle East. And there is so much more that he does, but I will leave it to him to share the finer details of his extraordinary, often dangerous, and very brave life journey. Welcome, dear Vincent.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful introduction and much appreciated. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. And thank you, Vincent, for joining me today, because I am really honored to have you here, truly. Of all the most amazing and remarkable and really heroic things that you have done. I am, as I said, in awe of all of it. And I'm so grateful that you managed to find the time to actually share this sort of time in your life in this moment.
Thank you. I'm very humbled and honored to be here to share it with everybody. Thanks again.
Oh, now, tell me, we've got to start somewhere. Your life is fantastic. Your story is the things that I don't know. It's like watching a James Bond movie. It really is.
That I've been told before. Oh boy. If
But we don't want
only.
to let all your secrets out.
No, definitely not. I think, it's very funny, Mimi, is that a lot of people still, and these are close friends, still wonder what it is I do. I just actually saw my brother. He lives in South Carolina, and we're very close, but unfortunately, we don't get to see each other as often as we'd like. And we saw each other just a couple of weeks ago because we were both visiting my father, who lives in Florida. And my brother said to me, he says, I got to ask you something. He says, people ask me, hey, how's your brother? How's he doing? What's he doing? And he says, I never know what to tell him. He says, I don't know what you do. He says, what do you do? So, we spoke for a couple of days, and I tried to explain to him kind of what I do. And he says, okay, at least I know a little more, but he says, I still don't know what all that means, so. Yeah, and a lot of my friends just, many of them just say, there's a lot of things you're not telling me. Are you a spy? Are you a spook? Are you a this? I said, come on. I said, you can go online and read it. He said, yeah, like I'm going to believe everything that's written online. So there you go.
It is. It reads. It has to be made into a film, I have to say, because I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, my goodness, look at all of this. And it is like an adventure. And
right, yeah.
you are very enigmatic. Even though there's a lot of things that you speak about and all of the, fantastic work that you do, there's so much there behind the scenes. And I totally understand why people have that feeling.
Of course. I'm even trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up.
Don't grow up.
Yeah,
that's the point.
Well, that's for sure. Yeah, I'm trying not to.
Yeah, don't grow up. That's the trap.
Yeah, it is certainly the trap.
That is the trap. Now, you have a very interesting also start to life. Now, you have a fantastic name, Sir Vincent Raymond Percival Lyn.
Yes, very
what
British.
A name. Now, how can someone with a name like that not lead such a extraordinary life? The name actually has given, the stamp, the seal of approval. We were talking, I have to say to the audience out there, we were talking earlier, and I said to Vincent, you are the golden child, because look at this name.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's the name the Vincent was from my father. Mm-hmm. And his father was Vincent. Raymond, I don't know, that was a given name. The Percival, though, was my grandfather on my mother's side. His name was Percy, so a very English name. And then the Lyn, of course, is the family name. But interestingly, the Lyn, because it's on my father's side, my father's Chinese, like many names, when my grandfather left China, he came first through San Francisco at a time when the Chinese were being used basically as slaves to build the railroad. And so when he saw the way people were being treated, especially Chinese, he said, no, this is definitely, I'm not staying here. So, but when he said what his name was, Lyn, they wrote it down phonetically the Western way you would write it down. So, either it's Lyn or Lynn, which is usually used more in Ireland. But so a lot of the family on my kept the Lyn, and then many of the other side of the family, of course, it's Ling. So in my passport, it's Lyn.
Lyn. Okay.
Yeah, Lyn,
now,
yeah.
And your mother is British?
British. She grew up in Huddersfield in Yorkshire.
Ah, okay. And you were born in Yemen?
I was born in Yemen, of all wonderful places.
Of all the most mystical places.
Mystical, well, yeah, mystical for sure. And funnily enough, you caught me on a day I was just at the meeting with the minister of Yemen this morning at the Yemen UN consulate. So I was meeting with him again, and we discussed obviously the unfortunate situation that is going on in Yemen.
So tell us, pray,
yes.
do tell. Tell us, let's go back. Because look at all these things that you do. I mean, you're an actor. You are an acclaimed musician.
Mm-hmm.
You are a humanitarian, a filmmaker, a composer, an author, a martial arts expert, etc., etc. Come on. We need to know where this all started. This is just like a Pandora's box.
Okay, where it started. Well, that's a pretty simple answer, because I was fortunate to get both skills in terms of art, martial arts, from my father's side of the family. That's been in, we can actually date it back to the beginning of the Ming Dynasty in 1368. And on my mother's side was the musical talent. She was actually my first piano teacher. But her and her sister were an actual famous, they were child prodigies. They were obviously both children of World War II. So, growing up under that horrendous time as young 4, 5, 6-year-old children. But they became very, very passionate musicians, and between them they actually played like 8 or 9 instruments, and they won like national accordion championships. I know my mother was the European champion, and they had their own children's hour for the radio show for the BBC, and they opened for a lot of very big names. One of them was obviously the British comedian and singer Max Bygraves. They were extremely talented, and obviously that's where I got my musical abilities from my mother's side. And the rest is history. Obviously, it took much dedication to study both martial arts and music. There really isn't enough time in the day to give to both art forms. But yeah, I did, and today there's 50 years later, there's still passions that I practice on a daily basis and kind of use in my life.
Now, did you grow up in England?
I did.
You did? Okay.
I did. Yeah, formative years were growing up in England. 2 years, of course, were in Yemen, and then we lived in Khartoum in Sudan. We were in Libya, Algeria. But yeah, I would say, from a young age of like 4 until 16, which is when my parents emigrated from the UK to America. Yeah. So lived in Oxford for a time. Lived also on the Royal Air Force Base in Abingdon, but Oxford, in Acton, and then lastly was in Kew Gardens in Surrey.
How lovely.
Yeah.
And I saw that you studied at RADA.
I did.
That's very posh.
That is rather posh. Well, that's kind of
Isn't
like,
it? And you
it's
did
also like,
elocution lessons.
I did, and I got distinctions. But that's also posh, like, you know, living in Kew Gardens, right? One of the most posh
Well,
places in England.
yes,
Yeah.
it was a must.
Yeah, it was a must. Yeah, thanks to my father's hard work, I guess.
And is this, Vincent, what actually then inspired you to start your acting career?
No, not at all.
Ah,
No, not at all. It was great that I was able to have that experience and fortunate to be able to take those exams and all that. But it certainly wasn't, because my main focus was very much music. And of course, when we came to the United States, I got accepted to Boston Conservatory of Music. So that was my focus, was piano performance and composition. Yeah. So it had nothing to do with acting. That came kind of vicariously much later.
so when you graduated from school,
Yeah.
what did you do then? Where did that take you?
When you say school, you're talking about university.
Yeah.
Okay. I was, well, after university, I started actually teaching for about a year or so in a martial arts school in Massachusetts. I was also, competing at the time. The music kind of had taken somewhat of a back seat. And interestingly, about both the martial arts and music, they've flip-flopped throughout my life. One has taken precedence over the other. And it's not that I have stopped, but, it's after that, as I said, and started teaching, it was around that time that I got an opportunity to go to Hong Kong. And so I kind of jumped on it and went to Hong Kong. And through kind of a number of trips back and forth, eventually I got signed to do my first film, which was in 1988. And I thought that as I had gotten this opportunity, I had left many students that I was teaching at the time back in the States. And I said, well, I'm going to do this one film, get it out of my system, and come back and then open up my own school. But of course, that it didn't happen that way. And one film became, 30 films. And it just became this snowball effect. And it became a little, I would say, very surreal at the time because, to go from, making very little money, I was, in my 20s, and then all of a sudden, all this money is being thrown at you and all these kind of avenues to jump off from doing film. Because then I started modeling. I got assigned with the elite modeling agency. I was doing television commercials, and then I also got signed with Polygram Records to write for local artists, and teamed up with a very, very famous Hong Kong lyricist. And so it happened in a relatively, I guess, short time, over 4 or 5 years. So, to make hardly anything and then you're making millions of dollars, it's a kind of surreal, and it got a little, as you can imagine, it kind of got a bit heady, and I kind of ran away. I got kind of lost in that whole mix, this kind of whole kind of, I don't know what you want to call it, self-aggrandizement, or lost in the whole entertainment world. Yeah. So when I look back at that period of my life, I think to myself, goodness, I'm so glad that I was able to be in that world, but at the same time, I wish I had been a little more smarter in certain decisions that I made, I guess. But it was all part of my life experience. Yeah,
Absolutely. And hindsight is a
of course.
wonderful thing.
Yeah, of
It's a
course it is.
wonderful thing.
Yeah.
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 um, Now, how many of these films? I mean, you have done so many films, but how many actually were you involved in playing major roles?
Uh, well, I would, goodness, there were 20 Hong Kong films, and then of course I did other films outside of Hong Kong, but most of them, for example, the first film I did
Mm.
was with one of the most famous action directors in the world called Yuen Ping, and he was responsible for doing films like, The Matrix trilogy and oh my goodness, the films with Quentin Tarantino and I mean, really, really famous action director. And I got this role as playing the lead villain. So, and it was his comeback film. He was the one who was responsible for starting Jackie Chan's career. And it was a film that he used basically every major Hong Kong film star of that genre. And so to be in a film that became internationally successful throughout Asia, I kind of, you can't go down from that, you can only go up. So being that was the first film, every film that I was in after that led to co-starring alongside Jackie Chan, which is, another amazing experience. So to answer your question, yeah, I co-starred in nearly every film that I did.
It's remarkable, really, how our life takes us in a certain direction because you've lived that life of fame and you were and you are well known, you're famous in your own right. And then on this completely different scale of life, you are someone who is heavily involved in humanitarian work.
Mm-hmm. Very much
So,
so.
how did that all transpire?
It happened, I can tell you exactly, January 2015. So that was what, 8.5 years ago? I had, when 9/11 happened in in America, in New York here, a year after 9/11, I started a security company, um, really working with the kind of wealthy New Yorkers, protecting their children and so forth. Because at that time, um, America, especially New York, uh, the world was paranoid that there was going to be another attack. And so a colleague of mine said, you should start a security company because, everything is about timing. And so that's what I did. I actually moved into New York and started this private security company. And from that, it led me to do close protection, executive protection for VIP families. And I was with a very wealthy VIP family from Sweden who were building infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, clean water, sewage, and shelters and schools in East and West Africa, specifically in Ghana and also in Kenya. And so we were visiting those two countries. And when we arrived, part of the trip to Ghana, we were visiting a a shelter that deals with rescue and recovery of children who have been rescued from child slavery. And here I am doing this job of close protection, and but I had never witnessed seeing children who've been rescued from child slavery. I had never come across this before. So seeing these kind of scantily clad, traumatized children who you could just look in their eyes and tell the horror and terror that they have suffered. I got very emotional and I got choked up. I was actually starting to tear, and I was about to cry, but obviously here I am doing this, job.
Yeah.
And I can't let that happen. And so I had to look away, and get myself back in the job zone. But the day that happened, seeing that look in these young children's eyes, it's stayed with me until now. Probably it will always be with me, because I've seen that look many times again in different countries. Obviously, most recently in Ukraine. But that day changed my life, and from that moment on, I wanted to try to help in any way I could. And it took me from many, many countries, from Thailand to Myanmar to Lebanon to Palestine to Iraq to Iran to it took me all over the world in terms of many conflict countries, many countries where there are wars and conflicts and children who are suffering or have become orphaned from conflict and then have become refugees and so forth. So it was a very difficult path, because there was a lot of mistakes made, and obviously just geopolitical situations current that are in certain countries, that wanted help, and then some didn't want help because of corruption and bureaucracy. And I mean, there's so much to it. I could write a book, and I have written 2 books on my humanitarian work that were published. I actually wrote them during COVID. One is
What are the names of the books, Vincent?
The first one was called Childhood Lost, which was specifically on my humanitarian endeavors. And then I did a follow-up book called Generation Hope. They're both out on Barnes and Noble and Amazon. So that brings me up to, the work is an ongoing process, not an easy one, to say the least. But I'm a firm believer that, and I guess I've realized also, it's not possible to save everybody. It's not, the UN can never do that. UNICEF can never do that. All the billionaires in the world could never save every child. But if I can save one, then it's worth it, because you never know that child with the right love and care and compassion, possibly, they can do wonderful things with their future. So I think it's important for me at this stage in my life to give back in any possible way I can. And obviously I've put my life in danger quite a number of times. So I guess if I'm to come back as a cat, I've only probably got about 3 lives left.
Oh dear. It's heroic and it's noble. And I know that you spend months sometimes in these situations, and they're life-threatening and dangerous. How
Yeah, they
how
are.
as much as you can, of course, and you are able to reveal to myself and the people out there, give us an example of something that you have been involved with and what it takes to do such a feat.
Many of these stories, not all, but quite a lot of them, I wrote about in the first book, Childhood Lost. So they're written in great detail in some of the chapters of that book. I mean, one story could take up half an hour, but I mean, briefly, oh my goodness, I was.
I know there are so many, and it's asking you something which seems impossible now to explain in a paragraph, but just so that people can get a feel for you. And of course, they can read the books, which we can link to in the episode and with all the other things that you do, but something to get a feel for really what is an impressive life mission of yours, that you have actually dedicated your life to serving the people.
Right. Oh boy. Well, oh boy.
What's your most dangerous one?
Oh, you're really putting me on the spot here. I think I would have to say, wherever your life is threatened,
Yeah.
everyone is going to be the most dangerous. I've been shot at. I've witnessed genocide. I've witnessed ethnic cleansing. Just too much brutality and too much suffering in places like, South Sudan. And of course, the situation in Sudan again is just absolutely awful. I witnessed just horrific things in South Sudan. And my driver was killed there by child soldiers. A bullet ricocheted off the Kevlar helmet I was wearing. So if I hadn't been wearing that helmet, I definitely would have been killed instantly. In Iraq, roadside bombings and IEDs. There's just too much to.
I know. I understand
there are
totally.
a lot of things. Beyond all those near life and death situations, I think what's even more important is actually the rescue of children. To see.
So were all these, Vincent, sorry to interrupt you, all these missions to rescue children?
Yes, they were.
Okay, so you're putting your life on the line in the most horrific circumstances to go in and rescue children from catastrophic events.
Pretty much. I mean, it's as most recently in Ukraine, and of course that war. I was there twice last year. The team, we were able to get out mothers and their children, and obviously when the war started, February 24th of last year. I first went to Ukraine a few months after that, and of course, I think the whole world was mortified at hearing these stories of atrocities that were being done by Russian troops on Ukrainian civilians and women and children as well. And of course, we don't nobody wants to believe that these things are going on in the 21st century. And later on that year, or last year, so after the first trip, a number of months later, I was appointed Deputy Ambassador of International Human Rights. And so I went back to Ukraine in July of last year. But obviously with the new appointment, I went back to document atrocities that had happened, and also to interview families, especially mothers, surviving mothers or surviving, children, and again to try to rescue and get some of the families. And I say families, it's obviously mother and children, to get them out of Ukraine, either to Warsaw in Poland, or we also brought families to the capital of Latvia, Riga. But also, was to document these atrocities, which I also spoke at and addressed the Houses of Parliament in London, or actually House of Commons. So, and, just to see the look when a child or the mother, looks at you and just in tears, and you're in tears as well, and they're thanking you just to get them to safety, to get them out and to get them in a safe, stable environment. I tell you, it doesn't. Anybody, you kind of just break down. And I'll always remember on one of the last trips to Ukraine, we got this family to Riga, to Latvia, and it was this old kind of castle that was converted into a kind of like a hotel or a motel. And I remember that after the 20-hour drive out of Ukraine through Poland, Lithuania, and finally in Latvia, it was like 3 a.m. in the morning, and this 11-year-old boy says 3 things to his mother, and I'll never forget them for as long as I live. And it kind of wraps up everything in a nutshell. And of course, he was speaking in Ukrainian, and part of the 5-man team, or the other team members, of course, can speak, Latvian, Ukrainian, and Russian, and of course English. So they translate, and the little boy said to his mother, he says, "Why are they helping us?" And he said, "I don't understand why they're doing all this." And then he said one thing that just will stick in my mind. He says, "Why are they being so nice to us?" So from an 11-year-old boy to say that to his mom. And then, of course, we heard this because I had interviewed his mother about how she got out and the situation in the city that she left. As an 11-year-old boy, he had already witnessed his neighbors being executed, bombs dropping, everything around his house being destroyed, Russian troops coming into his home, knocking his mother around, intimidating her, threatening to kill her children. So as an 11-year-old boy, he has seen already too much. And it'll take a long time, many months of compassion and therapy, to bring that boy back to a safe world that we are, presently, you and I are living in, right? So, but that said it all. When the boy said, "Why are they being so nice?" It was as if everything he's witnessed once the Russia invaded has been traumatizing. He's just seen death and death and more death, and I for that reason alone, if I only got that family, those 2 young boys and the mother out, then it's all worth it. I can't say anything more than that. Yeah.
I don't even know what to say, Vincent, because what a story, what a life that you live. And it really is heroic. And I just wonder, as you were saying this and sharing with us, are you in peace that you are doing this job, this, I don't know, modern day hero, in effect? Are you in peace with it? How do you live with everything that you see?
Yeah, that's probably a very difficult question. There, when I came back from South Sudan, and this was, I remember the day, it was Boxing Day. Not that we have Boxing Day in the US, but Boxing Day, of course. It was
Yes.
Boxing Day 2016, and I remember it was 107 degrees. And it was like an oven. I'll never forget it. The wind and the dust, and the sand just blowing on you, and you're just baking. And I remember coming back after, going through that kind of traumatizing experience. And I was in therapy myself for about 6 months, because I knew that I recognized that it had affected me in a way that I need to get some professional help.
Yes.
Not that I was going insane or anything, but I think, I probably witnessed more warfare than many soldiers have. Because not all soldiers, in fact, probably only a small percentage actually go to war. They could be in the military for many years and never have experienced war, which probably is a good thing. So I've probably experienced more warfare or witnessing it, than most soldiers. So I realized that after seeing that and also living through what I had been through, that I needed to, seek some professional help to get through it. And so that's what I did. And I guess each time, not to say that it gets any easier, because it doesn't. It never gets easier. You still get emotional. You can't help but, I don't care how tough one thinks they are, you still cry and you still weep, especially when children are involved, because at least maybe adults, they can run away, they may be able to defend themselves, but what can a child do? A child can do nothing, right? They are the ones who are most innocent and the ones who are most taken advantage of. So you can't help, I don't care who you are, but feel empathy and compassion for innocent children. But what I do, or what I have learned to do, is to, after I come back, is to take some time out for myself and decompress before I decide to, return to wherever. What I will tell you is that when I do come back, I always have a hard time just jumping back into whatever regular schedule I was doing before I left. So I have a hard time being around people, or in, let's say, a social setting, because I can't. It makes me very upset and angry when people are talking about or complaining about, my steak was burnt, or how long I had to stand in line at the grocery store, or little silly things like that.
Banality, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. idiotic stuff that we complain about. So I have trouble, and so I just have to decompress in my own kind of self before I can kind of be around other people, and kind of deprogram yourself and realize that, okay, I'm back wherever. I'm back in London, I'm back in New York, I'm back in a stable, safe, the everyday normal environment. Yeah, but that takes it takes us some weeks before I can do that. Yeah.
And how often are you going now to these different places?
Usually twice a year. For example, I was supposed to leave for Syria a few days ago, but my father's health is a little ailing, so I wanted to visit him and just and then of course my brother came as well, as I explained. So I pushed the trip back until July. So that's when I plan to go back to Syria and Lebanon and so forth. Yeah.
I saw that you were in Palmyra and
Yes.
Aleppo. I've been there.
Oh wow!
So,
what year were you there?
oh gosh, do you know what? You're going to laugh. I was trying to go through my photographs before the war.
Oh, so you were there before 2011?
Yes,
Oh,
before the
okay.
war, because I was trying to find photographs. I was thinking, what year was that? Because I wanted to talk to you about it. But yeah, I saw that you were there, and it was a fantastic country. What can I say? In Damascus and all these places.
Well, there you go. You hit the nail on the head. It's that you saw it from a perspective of before the war that started in 11. I don't know of Syria before the war. I was there in 2019, and I was there in 2021. So through my eyes, I have seen an absolute total destruction of a country that was once, through your eyes, once one of the most beautiful in all the world. Because it's interesting, a lot of people don't realize that before
it truly was.
Yeah,
it truly was.
That before the war, Syria was one of the top 5 countries most safest in the world to visit, and because of its where civilization began. I think I've done the history. That Damascus is the oldest city in the world. It's like 11,000 years ago. Yeah. So it's and to see now a country that more than 60% is uninhabitable is just, it's really devastating, and it's just soul destroying when you witness what's happened there. Yeah.
It must be, because as I said to you, I remember my friend had moved there. She'd married somebody, and we had gone to see her. We spent about 3 months there, and we went all around. Predominantly, our base was in Damascus, but I remember we were talking to an old man, and it sounds like a fairy tale, but really it was. And he was the keeper of a very spiritual place, because it has so many very holy sites and, spiritual places there. And I remember he said to me that the legend was that where Angel Gabriel had put his hand to stop the murder between Cain and Abel, because all of these, where this mountain is where all the prophets and saints and holy people had walked, and there was a few drops dropping from the ceiling of this cave. And he said to me something very interesting, and he said he was very, very old, and he said, "You see these drops? This is the mercy." And I remember I was with some friends, and I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "This is the mercy. These are the tears of Damascus." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "This was flowing. But," he said, "remember my words. Soon, this country will not be able to be recognized. There will be atrocities, it will be over when the last drop has fallen. And I went away, Vincent, thinking I really believed him. He was so convincing.
I wonder, I'll be very curious to know what year you were there.
Yeah, I'm going to find my photographs. I was looking for them last night.
Wow.
So that I could remember, because it's so many photographs, so many things, and so many places I've lived and been, that I thought I've got to find these photographs, because I know that you were there. So I've got to, because it was nothing. What you were
no, you
in
talk about
Palmyra, it was a completely different place.
Oh no! Well, ISIS took over Palmyra. They basically killed everyone in the city, and they used Palmyra as a base of operations. And so their mark, of ISIS, the flag and their name is carved into many of the stones in the city of Palmyra. So. And
we stayed with Bedouins there for a week.
They executed many people, by the hundreds in Palmyra.
The tragedy of life.
Yeah. So,
my goodness,
crazy.
And I could talk for days with you, really.
I could too. Yeah.
I really could, and ask you so many things that are, I don't even want to, because water it down, because it's such a short time that we speak, but I want people out there to know what a fantastic work you're doing, but also even speaking about it in such a short time, I don't want to lessen the effect of what you do, because one simply couldn't put into words the type of really heroic work that you do.
Thank you. Much appreciated.
And I know that you also, I want to mention this, before we finish today, is that you also have your own organization called We Can Save Children. Is that correct?
That is very correct. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that.
It came out of the idea of how was I going to get started in this kind of crazy world of humanitarianism, and I started this nonprofit, We Can Save Children, 6-7 years ago, and it's taken me basically all over the world, to many of these conflict countries, and I've been able to get lots of help and funding through the years, but I will say, as I mentioned earlier, it's just not possible to help everyone, and so my kind of focus has, in order for me to, I guess, to do bigger things and help more, I've just lessened the focus and just focusing on a number of countries. The most recent, actually, I partnered with a UK charity called Help Children Now, and we were able to kind of facilitate getting 30 female athletes out of Afghanistan after President Biden issued the order that all the troops, both British and the US, were going to pull out of Afghanistan on, I think it was the end of October of 21. I think many of us remember the disaster that unfolded. And so there were thousands of Afghanis trying to flee. Many of them escaped, became refugees inside Pakistan. And of course, females, especially females who were playing sports, that's basically, a death sentence. So we know of this female cyclist and boxing team that had escaped to Islamabad in Pakistan. A couple of them actually had been caught by the Taliban and were beheaded. But it took us a year before we were able to find a stable country that would resettle them. And finally, the UK stepped forward and signed off. And so they got to the UK probably about 6 months ago. And so I was also in London to speak at the Houses of Parliament, because they had a big kind of, I guess, celebration and so forth that was held in London for them. And a few of the Afghan females were able to speak and address Parliament. And I know the BBC did a piece on their resettlement. So that was, I guess you could call it a success. I mean, I never know what to call it, but we got them out, and that's the good thing.
Yeah. What do you call it? It's
Well,
a tremendous. It's tremendous what you're doing.
Well, I don't. Thank you, but I just, I don't look at it like it's tremendous or it's this great thing. I just because I many times I can say, well, okay, and there are certain people that will say, okay, you got 30 out, but what is that? That's like a drop in the bucket. I said, well, yeah, that's true, but it's 30 less than, because if we didn't get those 30 out, they would have ended up like the two who got caught, so better that we got them out. And so, but I don't look at it like it's tremendous. I just think, thank goodness that we got these out of the country, and we were able to get them to a safe and stable country that would accept them, because that's also another thing that people don't understand, is that many countries will not step forward. The United States did not step forward on that. They should have, because they're the ones that caused the problem in the first place, but they wouldn't even lift a finger. So there's lots of politics involved and bureaucracy.
I can imagine.
Yeah, at the highest degree. And a lot of people don't realize that. You say, oh, you go to a country, you put them in a suitcase and you bring them over. No, it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. And I think about what you do and the work that you're doing. And I know people are saying, well, what's 30 people? No, that's absolutely not correct. Because I remember, many years ago, I was speaking to somebody who was involved in many sort of rescue missions. And they said to me, and I asked the same question, well, what's the point? And he said to me, there is a point.
Of course.
Because even if you say, and he says a very old saying, if you save one person, it's as if you've saved the whole world. Right.
Well, that obviously, that we know that saying from many cultures. It's obviously comes from the Torah, but it comes from many African cultures as well.
Yeah.
If you save one, you save the entire world. Yes. So, or you save the village. So, yeah. And also the other thing is that we can, for us who live in a stable country, whether it be UK or America, if we turn the table and I said, how would you feel if all of a sudden a country invaded this one, and now you became destitute, destroyed your home, took everything you have, left you with nothing, and now you become a refugee in another country? You either escape to Canada or you escape to Mexico. I know you can never think that would ever happen. And maybe not, but just put yourself in that position. You would hope that a neighboring country would allow you to come in, or a neighboring country or a neighboring government would go out of their way to see that you got something to eat, so it can happen it happens more than often. So it can happen to anybody. So you would hope that there would be other people who would care enough that they would go out of their way to help,
We live in hope. We live in hope. We know that the reality can be quite daunting and quite heartbreaking. But if it wasn't for people like yourself, Vincent, it would be even worse. So this gives a glimmer of hope in all the hopelessness out there in the world, in its, how can I say, in its darkest days, I suppose.
Yeah, and there are a lot of dark days.
Yeah, there are a lot of dark days, but we have to live in hope, and we have to be that hope, and you are that hope. And I thank you again, really sincerely from my heart, for joining me today. And I definitely want people to look up what you do. So please give the details of your work with the children. We Can Save Children. Is there a website?
Yeah, it's simply wecansavechildren.org. O-R-G. Simple.
Okay.
That's it.
And what about you personally? If people want to know more about all the other things that you do, your music, your books, your acting.
Well, that's easy. You just have to Google my name.
And all of it will come up.
A lot of it comes up. Yeah, too much. In fact, every 6 months or so, I'll Google my own name just to see how much more silliness is up there. And I wondered to myself, I'm like, who is doing this? Who has the time to write about me? I'm like, come on, stop this. Stop.
But don't look. You are the golden child. It has to be like that.
Not the golden, maybe silver, maybe bronze, but not the golden.
No. It is the golden child. Okay, I will say that. But right.
Thank you.
Please do come back again, Vincent. And
we'd love to.
I thank you truly from one soul to another. Thank you for everything that you're doing that so many of us would love to do, but it's not our destiny to do. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Mimi. Thank you very much. Let's definitely stay in touch.
For sure. Yeah. And I wish you a beautiful rest of the day in New York.
Thank you. And whereabouts are you in England anyway?
London.
Oh, you are? Okay. Well, then, therefore, next time I'm in London, we'll definitely grab coffee together.
Let's do that, because I have to find out more, and we will swap photographs on different ventures, on the more nicer pleasantries of life.
That's true. Well, I know I have to be in London at the end of September, so definitely we'll. So
let's do it.
We'll do that.
By then, I will have a little album of little things to show you.
All right. Excellent.
All right, then. Take care.
You too. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Vincent Lyn. A true modern-day hero. Extraordinary what people can actually live through and live to tell the tale, as they say. Thank you, as always, for joining me today, and I wish you beautiful moments and beautiful memories. Until next time, lots of love.
Thank you for listening to Secrets for an Inspirational Life, brought to you by your host, Mimi Novic. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast, and see you in the next episode. For more information about Mimi Novic and her books, music, and inspirational work, take a look at her website, www.miminovic.co.uk.